Welcome to the Unit 5B Critical Appraisal exercise on reading a qualitative study. We're going to use a similar format to the format that we used in Unit 5A when looking at a quantitative study. In other words, we've got an article, a qualitative analysis on soft drink consumption, and the CASP qualitative checklist. And you'll notice that there are similarities in the format of the checklist to the checklist that we used to look at a randomized controlled trial. So once again, we see that the questions for consideration are on the inside cover. It starts with, was there a clear statement of the aims of the research? And obviously, usually we find this in the introduction. So we go to the paper, we scroll down, reading the material, and then towards the end, before the methods section, we have a description of the purpose of the study to explore knowledge, attitudes and behaviours regarding non-alcoholic beverages and approaches to addressing their consumption. So that's quite clear. It has a population, it's young people, particularly university students. It has an exposure, caloric non-alcoholic beverages, and what we're looking for is the phenomenon of knowledge, attitudes and behaviours. So moving on, secondly, is a qualitative methodology appropriate? So are we seeking to interpret or illuminate the actions or subjective experiences of research participants? Well, in this case, the authors make this relatively easy because in the beginning of the methods, they say that there is little information on young adults' knowledge, attitudes and behaviours relating to caloric soft drinks, and so they selected a qualitative approach. And within that qualitative approach, they decided that there were benefits to be accrued from having students in semi-structured focus groups rather than individual interviews, and so they define and justify their research method as well as their qualitative approach. So having passed through the filter questions, we're then asked, was the research design appropriate to address the aims of the research? So have they discussed how they decided which method to use? They give a number of justifications in terms of the segmentation of the groups into male and female, because they anticipated difference in behaviours between them. They mentioned that they used an opportunistic sample because they were able to lay their hands on a concentrated pool of young adults that is accessible to the study team. And we should bear in mind that as a potential limitation, and indeed the authors do discuss this later on. So, was the recruitment strategy appropriate to the aims of the research? Well, there are a number of concerns about the recruitment strategy. If we go to the limitations of the study, which along with the methods is the most likely to give us an insight into the quality, we go to the section here in the discussion. It says here that there are several limitations. First, the sample of University of Sydney students may have differed from other subgroups of young adults, particularly comparing them with those who are employed or those at other type of institution. It's possible that the young adults were more budget conscious, and they raise the possibility that students may have been involved in health or other lifestyle based courses, which means that they may not have been so typical of young people of their age. So this seems to be the main limitation, and as long as we bear in mind the difficulty in applying this beyond a university population, then we can judge this appropriately. The next question is around the data collection. It talks about the setting, how the data were collected, whether there's a justification for methods used. Well, the authors make it clear that they conducted these assessments in a campus setting, that they recruited via a campus, that they used semi-structured interviews, and so all of these are factors that we should bear in mind when assessing the results from the study. As well as the recruitment strategy being a weakness, the next question: has the relationship between the researcher and participants been adequately considered? Now, of the 3 authors that we notice in the top of the article, we notice that 2 of those are from the University of Sydney, and so they can be seen as maybe having a prior relationship with students, particularly if they're on their course or that they attend in their faculty. And the third is an external public health officer trainee. So we need to bear that in mind, that maybe pre-existing relationships with the students may have affected whether they answered questions accurately or not, whether they were completely truthful. With regard to the next question, question 7, have ethical issues been taken into consideration? We do know that the study did achieve ethical approval, but bear in mind that that is a signal of intent. It doesn't necessarily mean that the study was conducted ethically. That we can see here that it says ethics approval was granted by the University of Sydney Ethics group, and there is a mention towards the end of the fact of using the University of Sydney students as a way of conducting the study ethically. So moving on to question 8. Was the data analysis sufficiently rigorous? We're looking for a description of the analysis process. Again, we return to the methods. You can see towards the bottom of this page here, it says that the focus groups were audio recorded, so we can be confident about the integrity of the data, that they were transcribed verbatim, they were supported by notes and memos, that there was a process of verifying the transcript to make sure there are no transcript errors, and they then examined these major themes, not relying on an individual interpretation, but discussing them within the larger research team. They coded and analysed the data, and they kept the male and female data separate in line with their earlier hypothesis and the way they designed the study. We move on to the penultimate question here. Is there a clear statement of findings? The findings are presented in a thematic approach. We can see verbatim extracts attributed to males or females. What you can see from this page is a predominance of females, and this is highlighted again as a weakness of the study and limits the applicability to a male population. But certainly there is a clear audit trail between the themes that are reported and the author's interpretations. And then finally, we're asked, how valuable is the research? Is it an area that's been well researched in the past? Is it making a new contribution? And importantly, in the context of this module, will it lead to approaches and recommendations either for future research or for delivery of health promotion intervention? And so if we return to the paper, we can see that the authors make the claim that, for example, they support some of their findings with earlier studies. They discuss the need to address the idea that soft drinks are something that can be used as an appropriate treat, which sort of ignores the potential consequences in terms of obesity. And towards the end here, they say that they investigated a previously under-researched population and that they've identified a number of implications for research and practice, including the suggestion of social marketing as a possible way of addressing health issues in this population. They do add a few cautions. Good studies will always be aware both of the limitations of what they've found and the need for further research, not as the blanket statement further research is needed, but preferably giving a detailed or precise specification for future research. So very briefly then, we've used the CASP checklist to navigate our way around this qualitative study. I've highlighted the main sections of the article and where they address the questions from the CASP checklist. You'll see that apart from the aim, which is located in the introduction, that most of the data for judging the quality of the study are located in the methods, and that there's the very useful limitations discussion towards the end of the article, and we also consider the findings in terms of, is there a clear link between the verbatim statements of the students and the conclusions of the researcher. In conclusion, for this article then, we noticed a couple of limitations. One relates to the opportunistic sample, the convenient sample within the campus and whether it's representative, and we also identified limitations in terms of the relationships of the potential researchers with the interviewees, not necessarily being concerned that this will be a problem, but flagging up a lack of transparency or clarity, so we're unable to judge if indeed this is a problem. And just a reminder that we said previously that a good article would contain enough data for you to judge whether the study had been conducted well, and in this case we've used the checklist to highlight a gap. So thank you for your attention. I hope you'll be able to follow a similar process for your own quality assessment, critical appraisal of a qualitative study, and to record your observations on your chosen study to contribute to your portfolio.